schools look like they have since colonial times. So they are often weatherboard buildings plonked on a bit of space with some concrete pitch and a field for kids who are sporty to be able to kick a ball around or pass a ball around, and that's fine for those kids who are sporty and who like to do that sort of thing, but we know that that's not catering to the broad range of needs of kids that are going to school. So we know that the rates of kids with mental health problems, with anxiety, with the start of depressive symptoms, with autism, who are on the autism spectrum. So we know that sensory stuff is really important for those children, and we know that there's so much research around now about the optimal age for starting school, and there's a lot of debate about what is the optimal age for kids to start school. The reality is that kids are going to be ready for formal academic learning at different ages. So some kids might be ready for it at 4, and some kids won't be ready until they're 7 or 8. And so what schools need to be able to do is to cater to all of the developmental needs of the children who walk through their doors. And so that means a physical environment that provides a really enriched play-based learning so that kids can learn in a play-based way if they need to, and build the social and emotional and developmental skills that they need before they are expected to sit down at desk and learn to read and write. So the Puna Taiao Kaupapa advocates for a complete mix-up of what schools look like at the moment. So goodbye concrete and flat grass fields. We're talking about, instead of plastic fixed play equipment, we're talking about natural materials that can be moved and manipulated. So this is stuff that early childhood is already doing really well, and primary schools just haven't picked up on the good practice in that space. We're talking about elements that provide opportunities for sensible risk taking, for kids to understand their personal limits. There's been a really big focus on health and safety in schools, and I think there's a wide acknowledgement that that has gone too far, and now kids are just not getting the opportunity to test their limits and to build those skills, and that has implications down the line as they take risks because they haven't had the opportunity to learn their personal limits. The opportunity for, rather than just flat spaces where you have to go and boldly join in a group of kids having a game of soccer, that there are diverse spaces that small groups of children could play and make it easier for those transitions between groups and for people to build social skills. And if the natural environment allows them to go and potter about in a stream and play with some rocks, and then somebody else comes and sits down next to them and starts playing with those rocks next to them, then they connect with them over doing something. It's just, many adults can't do that, so how can we expect children to operate in a space that doesn't give them any chance to build into that, into those relationships and start those conversations. Another design principle Puna Taiao Kaupapa advocates for is for performing arts spaces in the outdoors. So we know that there's been a big focus on reading, writing and maths, and that this has come at a cost. So this is about providing opportunities for kids to flourish in non-purely academic worlds. So if you're an amazing kaupapa performer, to have the opportunity to be able to do that and be acknowledged for that, and for that to be considered as important as being the best person in your class at maths. We're advocating for things like sand and more wood and things that can be moved around, and water, lots of water plays. There's a lot of physical principles that you can learn from playing with water that kids don't understand that they're learning while they're doing it, but that are really important in leveraging often in the actual teaching. The inclusion of gardens will help kids understand where their food comes from and how their eating habits and nutrition, food production, all of those things. So we know that robotics is going to have a big influence on the future workforce. I know there's all these predictions about how many jobs that are around today won't be around in 10 years or 20 years. Those figures vary a lot, but we do know that the skills that our kids are going to need down the line are 21st century skills, they call it, aren't they? Problem solving, creativity, teamwork, these sorts of things these skills aren't learned sitting down behind a desk. So these are the things that if we give kids loose parts, they can create and they can learn together and they can adapt and they can figure out what works and they can problem solve on their own. And so we're giving them the tools and the environment to learn the skills that we know that they're going to need down the line. So another space that I think the implementation of this kaupapa will have a big effect in is in making schools more welcoming places for people with disabilities, or for people with all abilities, so all the range of abilities. So I'm not just talking physical disabilities, but because of course we should be designing schools that are physically designed for people who are in a wheelchair or have some sort of physical disability, but also for children that have sensory disabilities and have depression and have the early stages of anxiety by providing quiet spaces for those children to play and be in and have some downtime in and not feel like you're sticking out like a sore thumb and not feel lonely. And I think that all can be done with really clever design. We know that most schools, on average, the academic achievement of their tamariki Māori falls 20% behind their non-Māori peers, and we know there's heaps of initiatives going on to try and correct this inequity. So we think in a physical environment that's clearly grounded and in Te Ao Māori and Māori iconography can only help to support the use of Māori themes in teaching and practice and improve the culturally responsive practice of teachers and principals across schools that implement it.
What Te Puna Taiao is doing is fundamentally changing or opening up a whole area of our school grounds for new experiences to help our tamariki learn, not just inside but outside. And that's something which is a massive transformation of how we think of education. And it's really wrapped up in all of those theories and a lot of the research around the importance of play. But beyond that, it's also reconceptualising our schools as a community asset. And that's really what they are.